The FIA, the people who make the rules for racing, are getting a lot of trouble after what happened in Austin and Mexico. Everyone is talking about how the punishments aren't fair and how they need to change the racing rules. The drivers had a big meeting where 19 out of 20 drivers agreed that something needs to change, because one driver is racing in a really bad way. But will this change happen starting from the Brazil race? And will they change the rulebook at the end of 2024 to make racing even more exciting? It's pretty clear that what Verstappen did in Mexico was really dangerous. That's why the FIA was super strict and gave him 2 separate 10-second punishments for what he did to Norris at Turn 4 and Turn 8. Everyone was mostly talking about Turn 4 because we saw Verstappen push Norris off the track. It was kind of like how Russell pushed Bottas in Austin a few weeks ago. But Russell only got a 5-second punishment while the Dutch guy got 10 seconds for his move. The rule book is pretty clear about this type of racing. If a driver is being really aggressive and pushing another driver off the track to try to get ahead of them, the punishment should be 10 seconds. So it's not like Verstappen got some made-up punishment, even though it looked like that after how easy they went on him in Austin. It was always going to end up like this. The fact that it happened after Austin and after another big fight between Norris and Verstappen is what made the drivers sit down and talk about what's okay and what's not. According to 19 out of the 20 drivers, Russell said what Verstappen is doing is reckless and needs to change, not starting in 2025 with new rules, but starting right now in Brazil. When Russell talked about it, he didn't say any names, but his words were pretty smart. He said, "I think the stewards totally agree with what needs to change. What we think is that the biggest talk is that they wanted to wait until 2025 so everything stays the same this year." I would say 19 out of the drivers said, well, if it's right, make the change today, and I'm happy to see those incidents got punished. I think moving forward in Brazil, what we saw in Mexico and Austin, you won't be able to get away with anymore. 19 out of 20 of us all agree on where it needs to be. There's another hot topic we need to talk about, and that's who chose the stewards. In Austin and Mexico, we saw stewards that many fans think were unfair to certain teams. For example, in Mexico, the stewarding was done by Johnny Herbert and Tim Meyer. The first guy is known for his actions against Verstappen and his opinion on the swearing drama between the FIA and F1 drivers. The second guy is the son of the person who started McLaren on Austin. The stewarding was done by Derek Warwick, who owns part of Honda, so excuse us for being a little suspicious. When it comes to the stewards not being unfair towards certain teams, while the punishments for Verstappen's work were pretty deserved in Mexico, the Turn 4 incident is something that the team felt could have been avoided and given a 5-second penalty. Because it's pretty much the same as what happened in Austin between Bottas and Russell, where the British guy got the penalty for pushing the other driver off the track at Turn 12. Horner, on the other hand, thinks that Norris wouldn't have made the corner in the first place with how fast he was going, 15 kilometers per hour faster than his fastest lap. This suggests that the McLaren driver's goal was just to get ahead of Verstappen at the apex and have the right to defend it. But this is something that Verstappen has done very cleverly in the past too when talking about it. Horner now thinks that the rules have become very confusing because the outside line is the one that has the advantage when defending the corner. He said, "I think the rules are something that really needs to get cleaned up moving forward because there's great racing going on. I think it's just important that the rules of engagement are fair rather than giving an advantage to the outside line, which was always in the history of motorsports. Being on the outside has always been the more risky place to be, but now it's almost the advantage because all you have to do is have your nose ahead to the point that it doesn't matter whether you're going to make the corner or not. It's frustrating. You don't want to have to look at a rule book on every single overtake or defense. All of these guys have grown up doing a lot of racing and understand the basics of that. I think it's just important that we don't over-regulate to a point where you encourage behavior that's not within the guidelines of motor racing." Also, both Marco and Horner said that the 10-second penalty for the Turn 4 incident was too harsh and was given in the heat of the moment, especially coming off the hot weekend in Austin where Norris lost his podium place because of his penalty for his move against Verstappen. There are definitely a lot of changes that are needed everywhere, but the most important one is that we're very likely to see how the drivers are going to race for the rest of the calendar, which has 4 races, and to sprint events ready for us. What this means is that defensive moves and the right to the apex are very likely not going to be allowed at all costs, especially if drivers are making aggressive moves like Verstappen did in Turn 4 and 8 in Mexico and are basically putting their rival in danger. This is something that Toto Wolff thinks will be really appreciated by the competitors. When talking about how the rule change will affect the drivers, the team boss of Mercedes said, "A driver will always push to the limit, and when the rules or the understanding of the rules allows a certain way of racing, a driver like Max is always going to use it." Now there's been a new understanding and execution of those regulations, and I think it will change the way everyone races in the future, and you won't see that anymore. I think the stewards today decided that they don't want to see drivers pushing each other off the track. That will be the new normal. All drivers will be very aware that if you do that, you risk a 5 or 10-second penalty. I think back in the day, certain stewards had their opinion, and because it wasn't punished, it basically made it okay. Fair enough to have a driver who drives within the regulations and uses all the margins that are given to them by stewards. It's quite interesting because he went on to support Verstappen in his actions, even though he had every right to go against him after these moves in 2021 were considered hard racing, and Hamilton often had to back off and find another way to get past the Dutchman. However, the sport is now a lot more competitive, and it's very likely that in 2025 we're going to have multiple challenges for the championship, which hasn't happened in more than 10 years. Therefore, we need to have clean laws from the FIA, and the rules need to be respected by both the drivers and the stewards, who might get even more backlash for the appointments that they've been given by the FIA to certain circuits. Norris has also given his thoughts on the entire hard racing situation with Verstappen, while he admitted to enjoying these battles. The British driver was sure that something like this was bound to happen to his rival because he cannot always get away with his tricks. Explaining more about this matter, the McLaren driver said, "I go into every race expecting a tough battle with Max. It's clear it doesn't matter if he wins or finishes second. His only job is to beat me in the race. He'll sacrifice himself to do that, like he did today. I want to have those tough battles like I've seen him have plenty of times, but fair ones. It's always going to be tough with Max. He's never going to make anyone's life easy, especially mine at this point of the year. But I think today was not fair, clean racing. Therefore, I think he got what he had coming to him today. I felt like I had to avoid collisions, and that's not what you feel like you want to do in the race. He's in a very powerful position in the championship. He's a long way ahead, and he has nothing to lose. People can say it's the other way around, like he's got everything to lose and it's all for me, but it's not the case. Brazil is going to be a very tough challenge for Verstappen because it's very likely that he will get a 5-place grid penalty for changing internal parts of his engine. We'll see his championship defense take a massive hit because if everything goes normal in qualifying, he will find himself stuck behind 2 Ferrari drivers and at least 1 McLaren. Given the fact that Piastri has been disappointing in the past couple of races, this is where the Woking-based squad needs him the most. And this is where the team needs to step up to not just keep the fight in the drivers' category alive, but also defend against Ferrari in the Constructor Championship, as the Maranello team is now very dangerously close in the fight for first place. With all of this in mind, do you think that the rules need an immediate change from Brazil onwards? And if so, do you think that drivers like Verstappen will respect it without any agreement? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in the current drama that's going on in Red Bull regarding the second seat next to the 3-time world champion, make sure to click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now.